First things first, this happened to me when I was around 10. I lived in Idaho all of my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River. The river there never freezes over, and my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end where we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've ever heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as the whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted, but chalked up what happened as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here, I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghosts in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousins, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, and the older cousins hid in the nearby trees or at the base of a nearby mountain. As I was searching near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint to our location. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree, so I began trekking up towards the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on warily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I would find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott! Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me." So I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what had happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened, and I was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that. But those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game Until Dawn became really popular, and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in the game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw. I did a ton of research on them, and I figured someone must have gotten snowed in the old lodge and resorted to cannibalism. But that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear the screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and it scares the hell out of me every time. I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. I'm happy to see others also had these experiences. It's a bit like group therapy, in a very twisted way, I guess. This isn't an AA meeting or anything. Years ago, when I was fresh out of high school, me and my friends went for a camping trip. Since it would be the last time we saw each other before college sent us on our separate ways, we had planned to go deep into the national forest and the mountains, and just enjoy ourselves for a few weeks. My friends who came along were Preston, a Native American who had several years of survivalist strategies under his belt; Jamie, a hunting and gun enthusiast like me, with a propensity for adventure; Mark, Preston's friend, not so much mine. He smoked a lot of drugs and seemed to be okay, but I was always on edge around him. With us, we packed 2 tents, dried fruit, rice, jerky, camping supplies, and beer, along with a Mini 14 rifle, a Saiga 12 shotgun, 2 pistols, my Taurus Judge revolver, and Jamie's .357 revolver. We packed all of this into my battered BMW station wagon, with me being the driver. Stopped at a car park, we loaded up our gear on our backs and began going deep into the forest. The first day was uneventful. Preston found a good clearing for us to settle at. We set down our gear and set up the tents while Preston got to work with a cook fire. I was always good at setting up tents, so this wasn't a problem for me. Within 20 minutes, we had set up the basics for camp. I cracked open a beer and sat next to Preston, who had created a roaring fire. I smiled at him. "I'm gonna miss you, man." I patted his back. "Me too. Let's enjoy this," he responded. Jamie and Mark were carrying on, exploring the surrounding area. At the time, I could have sworn I saw a pair of green eyes and antlers looking at me. I would come to regret not asking Preston in the coming days. I tried to forget as we sat down to dinner that night. Campfire curry, a mix of curry spices, frozen chicken that we brought and prepared, and a few vegetables along with a small pot of rice. As it was the first night, we ate all of our perishables. It was tasty for sure. Then, like we were kids once again, we roasted marshmallows and made s'mores. It was truly a very fun time for sure. If only it would have lasted. That night was uneventful as well. I slept like a baby, and Preston, whom I shared a tent with, didn't seem to be bothered at all. The next morning, we packed up camp and decided to head south, towards a large river with the intent of spending a few nights riverside. As we were in the remote wilderness, I handed Preston my Mini 14, and I myself carried my Saiga 12, slugs, and buckshot alternated in its 10-round magazine. Jamie kept his .357, and I had my sidearm as well. We walked for what seemed like hours. The mistiness, overcast weather, and lack of clear landmarks required we rely on GPS and compasses. As we headed south, I saw the look on Preston's face. He looked worried. "Preston, what's up, man?" I asked him. He had me get close and he whispered, "I don't know, man. I got a feeling that a bad omen is about to pass. Keep everyone in sight. I'll listen for anything." As he said that, we heard what sounded like a distant whooping noise. All of us looked around. In the distance behind us, I could have sworn I saw something shambling. It was too far to shoot with my shotgun, so I pointed at it and told Preston to shoot. "Shoot that thing!" 3 shots from the Mini 14, and the smell of freshly fired ammunition filled my nostrils. Whatever it was got down on all fours and bounded away. "What was that?" Mark asked, shocked. Preston swore up and down in his native language before he finally said, "That, my friends, is something truly evil. We need to hurry to the river." We ran for about 30 minutes. Our pace slowed by the amount of heavy gear we carried. Preston looked from side to side, but found nothing as he did so. Soon, we reached the rushing river. and along with the fog seemed to dissipate. Preston looked around, shook his head, looked at his GPS, and finally said, "The other side of the national forest is available to us across a hand tram a mile upstream. We can make it there before lunchtime if we hurry." "Preston, what's going on? What was that thing?" Jamie asked, concerned. "I can't be sure, but it's nothing good. I want to try and lose it across the tramway. Whatever that thing is, if it's anything like my family stories, it won't ford a river. We're going, that's final." Preston led the way upriver, keeping close to the shoreline. Eventually, we did find it. A large steel and wood car suspended over a wide expanse of river. I got in first and wasted no time getting across. I watched the trail on the other side while Jamie went across next with some of the extra gear. And then, finally, Preston and Mark squeezed into the tram and got across. As I turned to leave, I saw Preston take out his Bowie, and he began hacking at the rope suspending the tram. "What the hell are you doing, man? That's state property, that's a felony," I said, bewildered. "We can't have the thing follow us." He hacked at the rope until it snapped and the tram car fell with a loud clang into the river below. As we left and started heading east, I could have sworn I saw those green eyes again, but just for a moment, watching us. We made camp at a clearing on the edge of a hill's wide ridge. It gave us great views and visibility, but more importantly, as Preston stated, we could see anyone or anything coming. As he sat and made the fire, he said, "We're doing watch rotations. That thing, I am genuinely afraid of it." "I bet it's just a bear, Preston. Too many family stories." Mark guffawed. As I said previously, he was Preston's, not my friend. I took the second watch. After Preston cooked a meal of rice pudding, I had no trouble staying up. Then Jamie. I sat up and talked with him for a while. He worried a little, and he expressed that he wanted to go home. "I know what you mean, dude. This is too creepy." Mark took the last watch. My shotgun propped up next to the tent in case he needed it, or so Jamie told me. When we got up the next morning, Mark had disappeared. Immediately, we questioned Jamie, whose story checked out. He saw Mark up and watching. We waited. Preston reignited the few vapors. He also pulled out a small can of pine tar and began making torches. "What are they for, Preston?" Jamie asked. "I'm sure of it. We've got a Wendigo," Preston replied. "A Wendigo? The hell is that?" I replied. "A cannibalistic demon with green eyes, a deer skull for a head, and the thirst for human blood. They're also like skinwalkers, you know, like in True Blood." At that time, the TV show was popular, he explained. I became very scared. "So, that grabbed Mark and ate him?" "We'll wait for Mark for a few hours. Keep the guns locked and loaded. Do not let him approach within 200 feet of the campsite. I'm going out for a bit." "You're crazy, Preston," I protested. He whispered in my ear, "When I come back, ask my favorite sailor. It's Saturn for the record." He then approached Jamie and told him something that I knew I wasn't supposed to hear. Then he grabbed 2 torches, his knife, and he turned back to us. "Wendigos do not like fire. Keep the fire going. There's plenty of sticks and wood right there for a few hours. I'll be back. Don't forget what I told each of you. If I can't answer it when I come back, shoot me." As he disappeared into the forest, I sat with Jamie back to back. He had my Saiga, I had my Mini 14. For hours, we heard various sounds in the forest, including those whooping noises, the sound of what sounded like Mark, and what I thought was the sound of a distant beating drum. By afternoon, we heard rustling in the forest, and none other than Preston returned, dirt smeared on his face and a makeshift drum under his arm, with 1 torch left. He stopped short of the campsite when I raised my gun at him. "What's this about, guys? It's me, Preston," he said. "What is your favorite Final Fantasy protagonist?" Jamie asked. "Squall, of course." Jamie lowered his gun. "What is your favorite sailor?" I asked slowly and deliberately. "Saturn, of course. I suppose this means Mark is still missing, yes?" He responded. I lowered my gun and said, "Come on up, dude." And yeah, we heard whooping noises but no sign. Preston averted his gaze. "It's hunting us. I confirmed the tracks, and my little serenade in the tribal chants caused it at one point to come and look at me. "How did you get away?" I asked. "I chased it with fire. They're afraid of it, remember?" He responded. "Do guns harm them?" I asked slowly. "It can injure them, but you really need fire or silver. We only have fire, as usual. We're going to burn one of the tents and drop some gear. We're going light. We're heading to the highway. It's 35 miles to the east, but we can get there over 2 days. But we'll need to double our night rotations, and if you see anything that looks like Mark, he's dead, guys. I'm sure of it," Preston responded. I was very afraid at this point, the sinking feeling that my idea could have gotten everyone killed. I took charge. "We'll do 15 miles today and 20 tomorrow. We will hitch a ride back to the car. We'll burn our trash as we move. We'll burn the tent tomorrow morning. Let's go, now." We hastily packed what we could carry and burned much of our non-essentials. We hurried throughout the afternoon and early evening, running when we could and walking as quickly as we could. The whooping call continued to seem to follow us at a distance. I didn't, however, see antlers or green eyes when I looked back. Eventually, we found a clearing that was decently sized, had good visibility, and sticks. We hastily gathered firewood, all staying as a group, and we pitched camp. That dinner was cold jerky and dried fruit. Preston was unwilling to attract attention for smells, but he did create several pine tar torches and set them out the outskirts. We didn't say a word, but me and Preston took the first watch, then Jamie and Preston, then me and Jamie. This continued every 2 hours until daytime. As day broke, we heard screaming. Mark's voice came from the woods, crying for help. Preston shook his head. It got him. We can't do anything about it. We burned that tent, and continued traveling throughout the day. I could see it today, though. It didn't bother to hide itself by noon. The Wendigo was about 7 feet tall. Its limbs were blackened. 2 glowing green eyes set into a deer skull with antlers. Soft, whooping noises. It kept its distance. I pulled my revolver and aimed at it, about 250 feet away. Firing, I hit it in the chest, but it barely flinched. The thing turned and stared at me. Preston began to shout at it aggressively in his native language. It stopped, tilted its head, and then responded to him. I asked him, "What the hell did he just say to you?" I asked him what he did with Mark. He responded, "Who's that?" Preston then grabbed my Mini 14 and fired repeatedly at him. This abomination seemed to get annoyed. I followed up with a well-placed slug to the chest from my Saiga. It howled in pain and dashed away into the woods. "We better run, I think," I remarked to the group. We ran for a good 20 minutes, when suddenly in a clearing ahead of us was a human silhouette, naked and filthy. "Guys, it's me. You gotta take me back. I escaped that thing and have been running from it for the last day." It was Mark. I pointed my Saiga at Mark. "What happened to your clothes, Mark?" "Yeah, and if you're Mark, tell us the name of the school we went to," Preston said. He pointed the rifle at his head. "Come on, guys, don't play around, it's me. I'm cold, I'm hungry, and I want to go home," he protested. Jamie shot him in the leg with his revolver. Mark screamed in pain. "Unless you want the next to be in your head, answer the questions." That's when Mark's head snapped to Jamie in a grossly unnatural fashion. I was paralyzed by fear as it appeared as if Mark was contorting and screaming in unnatural tones. I fired repeatedly. All remaining shells in the magazine. It just seemed to shred the upper skin. Putting that on my back, I remembered Wendigos hate fire. I grabbed my lighter and a can of bug spray, and I dashed at the thing that was once Mark, spraying it with a fire from my makeshift flamethrower. As I burned it, Preston laid down 2 entire magazines into it, and then dumped the rest of his pine tar on it, and Jamie emptied his revolver. When it finally stopped screaming and moving, we were left with a mutilated and charred corpse. Half Mark, half Wendigo. We all threw up. Preston began to butcher its corpse and said, "I've got to destroy it. It's only right that I do this." For an hour, Preston burned and cut up the corpse, then cut the heart out. He put it in a plastic bag and then shoved it into his jacket. It took us another few hours to reach the highway. Preston sat and began to cry on the sidewalk as Jamie kept a hitchhiker's thumb out. I sat next to him and asked, "What are you going to do with that heart?" "I have to take it to the reservation. There, my elders have to know these things are still out there, and we need to protect those from these monsters. He clenched his fist. "I'll wipe them out by myself if I have to, for Mark." By evening, a sympathetic farmer stopped and let us ride his bed into town. From there, I paid for a cheap motel room, where we breathed a few sighs of relief. The next day, we returned to my car. Thankfully, it started, and we left the area around the forest easily. I didn't talk to Preston for several weeks after that. He eventually showed up at my house during the summer, and asked my father if he could stay the night. At the time, I was still living at home. My dad obliged. Preston told me that his elders were shocked, and told them that they'd miss a party and take care of it. They came back with the skull of 2 Wendigos and 6 hearts. They also found scraps of Mark's t-shirt, surrounded by a pile of decaying gore. To this day, Preston, Jamie, and me have had a pact to never tell anyone about the horror we witnessed. I only break this pact now, years later, and because we can safely say that this is behind us for the present. My advice: if you hear whooping noises and see green eyes and antlers, run or fight it with fire. Guns can cause it pain, but only fire or silver can kill it. I pray that the abominations are wiped out one day, but I know in my heart that won't happen. Be safe. It would love to eat you. That's what my mother once told me. She said that she saw something outside in the woods and that it saw her too. I have always been banned from entering these woods, you see. That is because no local man or woman, no matter how stupid, because we've got a bunch of them around here, would ever enter the forest at the end of the town. At least, not after what happened to that Nolan kid. Billy Nolan might as well have been Satan's spawn for all I know. That kid, God rest his soul, was restless to say at least. He was the oldest of the Nolan boys. His parents were, and still are, good folks, and the same goes for his 4 other siblings. One foggy winter morning, little Billy went for a hike he would never return from. His screams could be heard across the town, full of pain, agony, and distress. Half the men raced till there, ran through the woods, but Billy was nowhere to be seen. My father had discovered what was left of him near the lake, and Billy's screams would still echo in the ears of those who searched for him. Damn, I even hear them sometimes at night. That was a big tragedy for our tight-knit community. I can still remember how much Mrs. Nolan shrieked and shouted and cried, how she scratched herself all over with these long nails of hers until she bled, how her eyes looked just like a mad person's when the whole town went to the burial of Billy's ears, 3 toes, 7 fingers, eyeballs, and several guts. That's all they ever found of him. And that was the last time a local had ever set foot in that forest. Those empty-headed tourists, though, they always don't give a crap. They always try to act superior, like they know and we don't. But sadly for them, that ain't the case here. Ah, those foreigners, always thinking that we're just trying to pull their leg and mess with their tiny little brains. A legend, they say. Nonsense and fairy tales. But it ain't fairy tales some hours later than they first go in. Then the screaming starts for everyone to hear. We can hear the tree branches cracking in two, the agony of the hikers, their desperate cries and their pleas. We can't do anything but stare at each other blankly and sadly. It isn't our fault they didn't listen, and oh boy, they never do. Now that I think of it, there must have been some people who made it out alive, except from Billy's search squad. Some other tourists survived the forest. It's not likely that you will make it out alive, but not impossible either. If you want to go out there, we will all tell you otherwise. But if you insist, remember, you're on your own. There are some pieces of advice a man like me can offer though. You may suddenly feel the urge to take a look behind you. For heaven's sake, don't. You'll see nothing. They never do. But once you'll do that, the feeling will grow more and more intense, until you won't be able to stop. Look at what's in front of you. You may hear it calling for you. If you stand perfectly quiet and still, it may sound like your mother, your father, or even your friend. Never answer, no matter who it is trying to imitate. You may feel alarmed and wary, but don't be terrified. It can feel that. And after all, it was your own decision to enter the woods, remember? Please, trust your gut. If you feel something is fishy about a certain path or route, don't follow it. You'll probably avoid whatever is waiting at the end of it. You may use your senses to the fullest. Keep your eyes open, smell, and listen. It's one thing to hear the crunching of leaves and twigs when you walk. It's another to hear it when you're all alone, standing completely still. Pay close attention. Lastly, just make sure that you remember the way out. As soon as you get lost, you're just another fresh piece of meat, and no one is crazy enough to come and try and save you. I hope you're one of the ones who listen. We can't take the screaming anymore. Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.